Welcome back, everyone. The federal government has dismissed a newspaper report claiming that the SAMOA partnership agreement signed June 28 has endorsed the rights of lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and that's the LGBTQ people in Nigeria. It also rejected the claims that Nigeria would receive $150 billion for entering into that deal. Minister of Budget and Planning, Atiku Bagodi, along with his information and national orientation counterpart, Mohammed Idris, made the clarification at a press conference in Abuja on Saturday. Both ministers called the conference to react to a newspaper report by the Daily Trust newspaper. The medium claimed the federal government signed an agreement with clauses requiring Nigeria to endorse the rights of LGBTQ people. It further said that a populous African nation would pocket $150 billion for endorsing a deal. That deal, rather, reports the Daily Trust has now apologized for. So tonight, Ambassador Usman Seriki, former Nigerian Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations, is joining me from our Abuja studio as we take a look at the fact and falsehood surrounding this agreement. Ambassador, good evening to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's good to see you again, sir.
Thank you, Olajumoke. It's a pleasure to join you. Good evening. Thank you.
Right, sir. So let's talk about this controversy that this deal has generated for a minute while you help us straighten that out. Then we also talk about why Nigeria had to sign this document and what we as a nation stand to gain from that agreement. So, I mean, from your own perspective, why is there so much misconception about this deal? Some Nigerians are of the opinion that the key priorities of this deal are clear enough for everyone to understand.
Yes, well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this issue. It's very topical, very interesting, and as you said, very controversial, unfortunately. Nigeria has to sign it because of the commitment it has to upholding international law and also in establishing partnerships with other countries and other parts of the world. Nigeria cannot be an island unto itself, remaining isolated and insulated. So signing the SAMOA agreement does not actually reduce the capacity of Nigeria to exercise its sovereignty in determining what happens within the territory, within the confines of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So it has to be borne in mind that the SAMOA agreement is a new version of the Cotonou agreement that expired after 20 years. And the Cotonou agreement itself was the successor to the Lome Convention or Lome Agreement of 1975. So these are three frameworks that were entered into between European countries, some African states, and then countries of the Caribbean and the Pacific to accelerate development and to cooperate to address global challenges and issues. So it is not a particularly human rights-centered document per se. It is an omnibus document. Currently, that is, I'm speaking in respect of the SAMOA agreement. It rests on 6 pillars or 6 clusters dealing with governance, political issues, human rights. And then it deals with sustainability or sustainable development, economic cooperation, migration, climate change, and other issues. So the 6 clusters compounded together form the essence of the document. And the document itself is a very big document, over 151 pages or so, and 168 or thereabout articles. So it is not the 12-page summary that people are now sharing on social media. It is a very big document. And Section 2, I think, and Article 38 is the one that was dealing with human rights. And as far as what I read in the document, it did not explicitly refer to the lesbian, gay, and all these controversial issues, the LGBTQ or something. But where the misunderstanding and the apprehension and anxiety arose was in respect to references to gender issues. And gender, in current international discussion, especially in the United Nations, when you are talking with the European and Western countries, they have introduced an elasticity to the definition of gender to encompass various shades of tendencies and behaviors from their own part of the world, from their own interpretation. Gender does not mean male and female alone. They have now interpolated other traits, other tendencies and behavior into the word, into the terminology of gender. And that is where the confusion and the apprehensions arose. And that has been something we have been confronting and dealing with throughout my period in the United Nations, in New York, and also in Geneva during negotiations. So you have to be skilled in knowing the nuances of terminologies, the hidden meanings, and also the euphemisms that are being bandied around during negotiations in order to camouflage or to hide the essence of the meanings that they are driving at. But going through the text, there is no evidence that it is promoting LBGT per se. However, interpretation will now give a sense of the meaning from the perspectives of the national, perspectives of the Europeans or the Africans. So we should reserve the right to interpret it according to our laws, according to our
Ambassador, thank you for going there. Right, Ambassador, thank you very much for going there, because I was going to take you up on these articles that have caused these reactions. And what you just talked about is Article 2.5, which clearly states that the parties shall systematically promote a gender perspective and ensure that gender equality is mainstreamed across all policies. So the main issue there was gender perspective. So what you're saying now to me is that these Nigerians have a reason to be concerned.
Well, as far as dealing with the Europeans is concerned, yes, Nigerians have a reason to be concerned, particularly from their own perspective and from their antecedents and behavior in other bodies of the United Nations. Virtually all the United Nations processes and procedures, they have infiltrated this sentiment of LGBTQ or whatever it is into those negotiations, even in innocent frameworks like UNICEF, WHO, and others. They have introduced this issue to denote their own preferences and interpretations about sexual orientation, gender identity, and so forth. But in negotiations, it is always the position of Nigeria and several African and developing countries to enter reservations and to make clarifications about the meaning of gender, about the meaning of sexual orientation and gender identity, and so forth, that they do not, as far as those countries are concerned, which was also the position of Nigeria, it did not in any way, shape, or form indicate that we have accepted the interpretation as the Europeans have done it. So we enter reservations, and also there is something called sovereignty clause in negotiations. You invoked the sovereignty clause to indicate that you reserve the sovereign right to exercise the interpretation according to your constitution, according to your religious beliefs, according to your customs and culture. And that goes into the script, the minutes, or the records of the proceedings, so that your reservation will now be used to exonerate you from not fulfilling the conditionalities that the Europeans want to impose upon you. It is my hope that the Nigerian delegation, during the negotiation of the SAMOA round, have entered those reservations and invoked the sovereign right or the sovereign clause to interpret terms and terminologies in accordance with our constitution, in accordance with our local laws, customs, traditions, and religious views.
All right, Ambassador. So there are other clauses. That's Article 29.5, which says the parties shall support universal access to sexual and reproductive health commodities and healthcare services, including for family planning, information, and education, and integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs, including Article 36.2 of this agreement. Why? What's worrisome about these articles, these clauses?
Yes, there is concern regarding the invocation of sexual and reproductive rights, and that goes back to 1995 in the Cairo Declaration at the International Conference of Population and Development, when the issues of abortion, reproductive rights, sexual rights, and other things were introduced. And that was the beginning of the confusion. And for 40 years, developing countries, particularly African countries, Middle Eastern countries, and the Vatican, interestingly, they have been resisting very, very firmly, very strongly, the introduction of these terminologies into agreements and expecting member states to abide by them. What sexual and reproductive rights and commodities mean, basically, is that you have the right to actually allow abortion to take place in your country. That is one. And also, even teenagers can access contraceptives, facilities for contraception. And also, you will teach sexual education in your schools as part of the curriculum. So these are very, very sensitive issues, and they are very issues that are really culturally not permitted to be discussed in public or to be treated as part of an educational curriculum. Mind you, we are not a permissive society where you can just go and do as you like, regardless of what your parents feel or think, regardless of what your teachers think, or regardless what the community thinks. So our culture and customs have been suppressed in terms of the recognition of sexual and reproductive rights and commodities and so forth. And we had issues with the UNFPA, with WHO and other organizations in terms of pushing this tendency on member states, especially in terms of reproductive health and rights, which means that people can claim to do whatever it is. It's my body, it's my right, I will do as I want. I will do as I am pleased with. So these are the controversies that are coming up in terms of our understanding. But their perception is that this is liberalism, this is freedom. People have the right to do as they wish with their bodies. And that is the controversy. So it involves abortion, it involves free contraceptives, it involves teaching of sexual education in schools, including elementary schools, primary schools, and so forth. And also publication of books on those subjects.
All right, but I'm just wondering, Ambassador, Nigerian law is very clear on same-sex, highly prohibited in this country. I mean, there's also a penalty. Shouldn't that nullify any suspicion?
Well, that was earlier when I said during the negotiations, it's important also to go with experts, people who know the Constitution, people who know the laws of the land, and also the nuances of, and intricacies of negotiation. It is during the negotiation that actually you make those explicit remarks where a clause or article or even a phrase or sentence contravenes your law. You automatically raise your banner, your national banner, and then intervene to point out that that area is not acceptable to your delegation, and you give reasons. But if, for instance, it's subjected to a vote, and there is the majority vote that it must stay in the document, then you now express reservation. That is what is called national reservation, that that particular segment does not apply in your domestic situation because it contravenes your law. And that is very clear and is permissible in international law. During the negotiations for the SDGs in 2015, I had the privilege to lead our delegation, and indeed, as part of the second committee, we were the chair of the second committee. We led the African group together with Kenya, and we entered reservations on these particular subjects, that they should not apply to us domestically, and that our laws supersede whatever are contained in those clauses. So once you enter reservations, during, not after the negotiations, but during the negotiations, and also invoke what I call the sovereignty clause, then you are covered, you are safe, and you have made your positions very clear.
All right, so Ambassador, for the abolished clauses in the final document, and based on your years of experience, is it possible that in the future, these clauses that have been abolished become an issue for member states? Is the removal of these clauses binding on the European Union?
Well, I think, here I will advise the National Assembly to seek for legal advice before ratifying the document. We may have signed it. During the signature, Nigeria was absent in Apia, in Samoa, but I don't know if we signed it afterwards. If we had signed it indeed, and we have brought it home for ratification, the National Assembly should now seek the advice of the Nigerian Institute for Advanced Legal Studies, NILES. The Director General, Mr. Mohammed Tawfiq Ladan, is one of the foremost intellectuals, one of the foremost experts in international law. They should seek the assistance of NILES, that is the Nigerian Institute for Advanced Legal Studies, to give them legal interpretation and advice on those controversial articles and clauses before they proceed to domesticate it and ratify it and for it to become part of the law. Now, the other problem with the Samoa agreement that people are highlighting is that it has insisted that it supersedes any other agreement that member states of the Samoa state parties to Samoa agreement will enter into any other agreement or clause. I don't think that is something that is very practical in terms of the sovereignty of Nigeria to enter into agreement with any other country or group of countries or parties. That particular agreement should not impede our capacity to enter into other agreements. So we have to look at all these things from the point of view of legal experts, international law experts, and diplomatic experts who are seasoned in negotiations to advise the federal government. But what I will say is that Nigerians should be calm about it. Nobody is coming to impose illegal or immoral anti-religious tendencies and practices upon us. We are a sovereign country. Our laws determine our behavior. Our laws determine and regulate the conduct of governance in this country. It is not foreign laws. It is not international treaties that we sign that will, in the end, affect how we are governed and how we are run. We have a president who was elected constitutionally. We have a National Assembly that was elected through democratic process. We have state governors. We have state house of assemblies. And all these are part of the mechanisms of ratification. And they will have to now agree to the content and substance of that agreement or treaty before it is enforced. So Nigerians should not be unduly divided or worried about these issues.
All right. And to also corroborate your final submission, Minister Atiku Bagudu has clarified that the agreement has not been finalized and requires approval from both the Federal Executive Council, the National Executive Council, and the National Assembly for it to be fully operational. So I must thank you, Ambassador Usman Seriki, for joining us tonight. He's a former Nigerian Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.